Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Sharadam Chandramauleesham Ratnagarbha Ganeshwaram Shankaran Charshya Shringesham Tungam Lokagurun Bhaje Shastrabdhi Paradrishwanam Sangahinam Taponidhim Bhaje Shri Bharati Tirthagurum Bhadraughadayakam Vidhushekhara Bharatyaha Shrayami Charanambujam Prajnana Makarandechhu Shishya Bhramara Jivanam या सृष्टिस्रष्टुराद्या वहति विधिहुतं या हविर्या च होत्री ये द्वे कालं विधत्त श्रुतिविषयगुणा या स्थिता व्याप्य विश्वं या माहुः सर्वबीजप्रकृतिरिति यया प्राणिनः प्राणवन्तः प्रत्यक्षाभिः प्रपन्नस्तनुभिरवतु वस्ताभिरष्टाभिरीशः. Offering my Sashtanga Pranamas to the Pada Padmas of the Ubhay Jagat Gurus. We are continuing our discussion of the Shiva Ashtottara Shatanama Stotra, following the Vyakhya penned by the great Vidwan Nilakantha Dikshita. Yesterday we had managed to squeeze in 17 names in the time that we had. We had finished with the name Bhaktavatsala. One aspect that we did not mention yesterday is that amongst the 25 murtis of Maheshwara that we were discussing, the Vyuha murtis of Maheshwara that we had said, this is supposed to be the 17th murti, which is called Chandeshanugrahanchaiva Tatas Saptadasham Smritam. The 17th murti is that murti that has specifically graced Chandikeshwara. So as we know, amongst the ganas of Shiva, alongside Bhrangi, Riti, Tundi, all of these ganas, Chandikeshwara is a very specific gana, and he is one of those ganas who was a human and then became a Shiva gana. So the Vatsalya, the benevolence that is shown towards the bhaktas was seen in this murti. So Nilakantha Dikshita here has told us that the name Bhaktavatsala is referring to this particular murti. From there we are starting the next few names: Bhava Sharvas Trilokesha Shitikantha Shivapriya Ugra Kapali Kamari Andhakasurasudana. This is the next set of names. Here we are starting off with the name Bhava. Bhavaya Namaha is how it will be. This is one of the 8 most important names of Shiva. As we said, many devatas have Sahasranamas, all devatas have Aṣṭottara Shatanamas, then there are Dvadasha Namas. But for Shiva, there are 8 names that are quite specific. And as we said, they are Bhava, Sharva, Ugra, Rudra, Mahadeva, Pashupati, Ishana. Amongst those, the first of these is called Bhava. So the word Bhava itself means he who is pure existence. Bhavati iti Bhavaha. There is one more meaning, that he from whom everything draws existence. Bhavati Jagad Asmat iti Bhavaha. He from whom the world comes into being. And these 2 names aside, these 8 names of Shiva correspond to the Ashtamurtis of Shiva. So the Ashtamurtis will probably come tomorrow. I don't think we will get to that today. But as we know, Shiva takes upon 8 forms: the 5 Panchabhutas, the Jiva, Surya and Chandra. So each murti has its own name. Amongst these, the first is called Bhava, and this is the form of Shiva that presides over water. So the Jalamurti, amongst the Panchabhutas, the Jalamurti of Shiva is called Bhava, which is why Sanjeevanam samastasya jagatas sarilatmika Bhava ityuchyate murtihi bhavasya paramatmanaha. So the form of Shiva that presides over water is called Bhava. And we might also then wonder why it is placed first amongst all murtis. It is because water is said to be the first thing that Prajapati has created. Apova idamasit salilameva. The Veda also discusses many creation stories starting with water. It is from water that life starts. It is from water that all other beings come into place. So for that reason, the Jalamurti of Shiva is called Bhava, and when the Ashtamurtis are grouped into one individual, that is to say, rather than viewed separately, when all 8 are put into one Murti. That Murti is also called Bhava. So the word, one more word for the Bhava itself means samsara. The entire cosmos that we see around us, that is also called Bhava. So what is samsara? It is nothing more than the summation of these, the Panchabhuta, Surya, Chandra and the Jiva. There is nothing else beyond this. So for that reason, the most predominant name of Shiva amongst the Ashtamurtis, and the first amongst them, is called Shiva. And specifically, as I said, the name Bhava applies to Shiva's Jalamurti as, and we'll see each name and the Murti that it corresponds to will have a connection. So here the Bhava name is applied to the Jalamurti, as I said, simply because all life comes from water. So if the name Bhava means that from which everything is born, that name corresponds the most to water amongst the Ashtamurtis. So for that reason the Jalamurti is named as Bhava. And we see that this is also there in many Vedavakyas, Bhavaya Devaya Namaha, Bhavam Devandarpayam, Bhavaya Devaya Namaha, Sharvaya Devaya Namaha, Namo Bhavaya Cha Rudraya Cha. There are many Veda mantras wherein Shiva is called as Bhava. So as we saw yesterday, many places he'll tell us where we find this name in the Shastras. So this name is found in the Vedas as well. Immediately the next name that follows is yet another name of the Ashtamurtis, Sharva, Sharvaya Namaha. So this comes from the Shri Dhatu, which means to torment. Shrinati means to torment, which is why in Samskrita we must be very careful while writing things. Many people, when writing the word for Veda, if they want to write Shruti, rather than writing Sha, the Repha and the Ukara, if instead of writing that you write the Ritva, the vowel, rather than a word that means the Veda, you will have written a word that means tormenting or tormentation. So for that reason we must be very careful in terms of what we write in Samskrita. So this Sharva means he who torments or he who causes pain. As we all know, as the Layakarta, that is indeed Rudra's job. That aside, this is the name of Shiva as Bhumi. So out of the Panchabhutas, in the Ashtamurtis, the form of Shiva that presides over Bhumi is called Sharva. Why? Because the result of any himsa or the result of any torment is that the object breaks down and returns to its original state. For most beings, that means that it merges back into the earth. Right? All dead bodies or all organic material at some point has to decompose back into the earth. So for that reason, the form of Shiva, that is the himsa karta, that is the tormentor, is the form that presides over Bhumi, as that is where everything goes in the end. After he is done performing its laya, it usually has merged back into the earth. So for that reason, the form of Shiva that presides over the earth is called Sharva. The next name we have after that is Trilokesha. Trilokeshaya Namaha. Some names, as I said, we'll just kind of go quickly throughout. Here we have, there is a one Vyakarana discussion here about what Triloka means, whether three should be there, whether it should be Triloki or not. We don't have to get into all of that. But we do have a Vedavakya here that is quoted that Ya eko jalava nishate ishinibhi sarvan loka nishate ishinibhi eko rudro nadvitiyaya tasthe ya iman loka nishate ishanibhi. This is one vakya that is there. A similar Veda mantra is found in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, wherein there is only one Paramatma who rules over the world, Ishinibhi, with his various Shaktis, and that Paramatma is Eko Rudraha. It is one Rudra alone, Nadvitiyaya Tasthe. There is no second like him. So that Paramatma is talked about as this Trilokesha. And this Ishanam, this nature of his control over the world, is of the form of Srishti Sthiti Samhara Kartritvam. As we said, the usual is explained that he is the entity in charge of the Srishti Sthiti Layas. So that name has been told here. The next name that we get is Shitikantha. Shitikanthaya Namaha. So here there is also one more aspect of our texts wherein our commentators will try to ensure that names or meanings do not repeat. So we have already gotten Shrikantha yesterday. Shrikantha yesterday, we discussed that it means what? Someone with an effulgent throat, with a radiant throat, resplendent throat, and this is due to his having drunk the halahala at the time of the Kshirasagara Mathana. Here Shitikantha, Shiti means dark, Shitikantha means someone who has a dark throat. Clearly these two names, they might very well refer to the same thing, but it is the commentator's job to make sure that they don't. So what Nilakantha Dikshita has done here is he has very nicely gone through the Puranas and found one more story that tells us why Shiva has a dark throat. And this is a story that we probably have never heard of before. So at some point in a previous kalpa, Shiva and Indra got into a quarrel. Or it is probably more accurate to say that Indra got into a quarrel with Shiva. That is more likely scenario. So that being the case, at some point, because there are some stories wherein Indra has come to disrupt a yaga and Shiva has paralyzed Indra's arm. Such stories do exist in the Puranas. So in such a situation, Indra threw the Vajrayudha, he hurled the Vajrayudha at Shiva, and obviously although the Vajrayudha is not capable of affecting Shiva, out of grace for the capabilities of Dadhichi Maharshi, who had given his bones to make this, he allowed it to make a mark on his throat. Since then, he had become black-throated. This is one more story that we have in the Puranas. And for this, he has shown us a shloka from Harivamsha, wherein when Krishna is praising Shiva, in the Harivamsha, Krishna does tapas for Shiva in order to get children, for progeny. So as part of that, Krishna tells one shloka there, Dattaf prahara kulishena purvam taveshanam amararajñati virya kanthe nailyam tenate yat pravrittam tasmat khyatastvam neelakantoti kayaha. Kulishena, the word kulisha means a vajra. So earlier Indra had thrown the vajra upon you. Because of the mark that made, you have become Neelakantha. This is one story that they have given. There is one more story in the Mahabharata. Which for good reason probably Nilakantha Dikshita, who is trying to show Shiva is Paramatma, has not shown here. But in the Mahabharata, there are many iterations of the Daksha Yajna story, of what happened in the Daksha Yaga. Of course, the Puranas also have many versions. In one of those, Shiva and Narayana fight in that Yaga. Shiva pierces Narayana with his Trishula, and Narayana chokes Shiva with his hand. So the mark that Shiva's Trishula made on Narayana's chest becomes the Srivatsa mark on Vishnu's chest. And the fingerprints wherein Narayana tried to choke Shiva became the dark spots on the throat. This is one more story, but I don't think Vishnu Bhaktas or Shiva Bhaktas would really like this, so he has just left it off. But that story is also there. Rather than that, this is a much better story wherein Indra has thrown the Vajra and Shiva has gracefully let it make a mark on his throat. So that is one more name that we get on in the name Shitikantha, and through this we see that Balashalita Bhaktavatsalata va Suchita. It both shows the prowess of Shiva, that even Vajra was really incapable of doing anything, as well as his mercy for his devotees, that although it does not do anything, he has still let it show some effect on him. Then the next name that we get is Shivapriya. Shivapriyaya Namaha. He who is the beloved of Shiva. So for all devatas, usually the wife will get the Ni Pratyaya. So in Sanskrita, there are some suffixes that are added when you wish to make a word into the feminine form. So of these, there are 6. Usually the one that you will get is the Ni Pratyaya, which will end in E. For example, Narayana, Narayani, Brahma, Brahmi, Indra, Indrani, more or less the same situation will come there. Or Aindri. However, for Shiva and Devi, their bond is so close that it is not Shiva and Shivi. It is Shivaha and Shiva. The word will not even change by that much. Because for all others, in Vyakarana, you will get one pratyaya called An, wherein it means that which relates to. So that which relates to Indra is Aindra, which in the Strilinga will become Aindri. So if that was the case here, it should have become Shaivi, should have been the lady who relates to Shiva. But they are unwilling to have even that much distance between them. So it is Shivaha and Shiva, which is why Bhagavad Pada also starts the Shivananda Lahari with Shivabhyam. So there is no need for anything. Shivaha, Shivacha, Shivascha, Shivau. So the Nama Samya is what it is called. There are some facets of Nama Samya, Rupa Samya, Kritya Samya. There are some facets wherein they are said to be equal in all forms. Their names are equal, their forms are equal, their jobs are equal. In that same way, the names are also the same. So Devi is called as Shiva, and Shiva is her beloved. Now, earlier we had already gotten the name Ambika Nathaha, and he who is the beloved of Ambika. So what is the difference between these two? The difference becomes that there we had only said that he is her husband and that he has asked for her hand in marriage. Here we find out that she is actually very fond of him. Earlier Ambika Natha means he wanted to marry her. We have not found out what her side of the equation is. But now we are told that it is not just Shiva that is fond of Devi, she too is in fact very fond of him as well. And through this, what we also find is, what do we mean when we say someone is very beloved to us? We mean that they are inseparable, they are very close to us. So the inseparability of Shiva and Shakti is also talked about here. You cannot separate Paramatma from his Maya Shakti. You can call it Shiva and Devi or Vishnu and Lakshmi, but at the end of the day it is that Parameshwara and his Shakti, Ishvara and his Maya Shakti are inseparable. That inseparability is described to us in human terms as affection, love and all of that, because that is the closest relationship that we have in this world, wherein we say that two things are inseparable. Right? Only when some kind of affection is there do we say that two entities are inseparable. So to make us understand that Paramatma and Shakti are inseparable, we have imposed, see, people wonder why is it that the Shakta and the Shakti are always husband and wife? Why are they not brother and sister? It is for this reason. The Shakti of Paramatma is always represented as the wife because that is the closest human relationship we have in this world, that is an inseparable relationship of equals. So for that reason, this name Shivapriya, he who is the beloved of Shiva, is pointing to the fact that there is an avinabhava sambandha. That is to say, one will not exist without the other. Right? If an object exists without its capabilities, it follows then that those capabilities never really belong to the object in the first place. If something is innate, it should not ever leave the object. So Shiva and Shakti, Paramatma and his Maya Shakti are irrevocably intertwined with each other. That is the meaning of the name Shivapriya. We cannot reduce these relationships between devatas to our family relationships. Shiva and Ganapati, Shiva and Devi, these are not just some family relationships that he has written down an Aadhaar card somewhere. Right? These are all higher concepts that we have applied to human constructs. So for that reason, these kinds of meanings are given. And we had earlier said that Ambika Natha is telling us about the Vivaha Murti of Shiva. So here, this is telling us about the Dvitiya Mumaya Saha, the form of Shiva, the second form in the 25 Vyuhas of Maheshwara, wherein he is seated with Devi on his lap. So that form is being told here. And there is a Veda mantra that roughly talks about this. Uma Sahayam Parameshwaram Vibhum Trilochanam Neelakantham Prashantam Dhyatva Munirgacchati Bhutayonim Samasta Saksham Tamasaf Parastat. So in this Veda mantra, the word Shivapriya has not come exactly, but the word Uma Sahaya, he who has Uma as his companion, that word has come. After that we have Ugra, Ugraya Namaha. This is also one of the 8 names of Shiva. This is the name that presides over Vayu. So again within the Panchabhutas, the form of Shiva that presides over Vayu is called as Ugra. Ugra we usually use in the world to mean as fierce. Right? We use this word for Shiva, for Narasimha, for Durga, for any form of Bhagavan that is killing someone else. So this is also told in the Shastra, Ugra Shatrudhiya Devaha. When Bhagavan fights against an enemy, he is called Ugra. And the meaning is quite nicely told here. Uchyati is the dhatu. So uch samavaye, that which combines or that which stacks up is something that is uchyati. So when someone becomes so massive that no one can compare to it, he is called Ugra. That is to say, nobody can stand against him. See, what is the point of becoming fierce? The point of being fierce or angry is to dominate the person in front of you, right? We only show anger when we are sure that the person in front of us will be subordinate to our anger. So anger is only applied when it is from a superior to an inferior. So the nature of Bhagavan as everyone's superior is innate in the nature of Bhagavan as Ugra. And there is also one more meaning that is given as Ut Gacchati, Ugraha. He who comes out, he who comes up, he who transcends the world. Again, to the same meaning wherein there is nothing he is not in the level of the world, but he is in fact beyond it. He is supreme to it, which is why everyone in the world must forcibly follow the rules that he has set in place. We will get this later when we talk about the word Bhima. But basically the Veda also says, Vishwadhiko Rudro Maharshihi. Yo Devanaam Prathamam Purastad Vishwadhiyo Rudro Maharshihi. Vishwadhiyo Rudro Maharshi is the patha that we are taught. There is one more patha wherein it is Vishwadhikaha. So he who is supreme to the world is Ugra. So Ugra is not just the fact that he is angry, but it is also the fact that he is supreme. He is above all else. So in the Shiva Purana, they have told us that this is the Murti corresponding to Vayu. Spandayan Pavano Vishwam Bibharti Spandate Chayat Ugra Ityuchyate Sadbhihi Murti Rudrasya Vedhasaha. The form of Rudra that as Vayu is responsible for all movement in living beings is called Ugra. And the reason why this Ugra is applied to the Vayu Murti is Vayu is responsible for all movements, as I have said. Any action in our body is attributable to the Prana Shakti. So this Prana Shakti is a concept that we have to understand carefully. When we take in any sustenance, there is a process through which that becomes energy. That process is attributed to the Prana Shakti. So the Prana is not just the air that we breathe in, but it is the ability of the body to take in food and water and make it into energy, which we can roughly maybe correspond to metabolism kind of thing. So that nature of Shiva or that nature of Vayu is seen in him as Ugra, because as Ugra, as the person who supersedes the world and sets it in order, he is responsible for all actions within the world. Just as Vayu is also responsible as the Prana Shakti for all actions within the body. So because this similarity is there, the name Ugra is applied to the name for the form of Shiva that is the Adhisthata of Vayu. Then the next name that we have is Kapali. Kapaline Namaha is how it will be. Here, this Kapala, as I said yesterday, Kapala is also, it is a patra that is used in yajnas. However, here it is not that, it is the skull. It is the skull of Brahma that Shiva did use as a begging bowl for the Brahmahatya incident that we had discussed yesterday. That aside, Bhagavan wears Kapalas as a garland in his neck. These are the skulls of Brahmas of the past kalpas. So whenever one Brahma's lifespan finishes, that Brahma's head is added to the garland in his neck. So this is meant to show that even Brahma does not compare to the lifespan of Shiva. He is more permanent than even Brahma. That is, even when Paramatma says in Gita, right? Sahasra yuga paryantam aharyad brahmano viduho ratrim yuga sahasrantam teho ratra vido janaha. 1000 yugas form a day of Brahma, 1000 more form the night. So now think of this is one day of Brahma, now think of what one lifespan should be. So many tens of thousands of Brahmas have gone and their skulls are all found in the mala around Rudra's neck. And here he has been very nice and only written Brahma, but actually in the Skanda Purana is written that the skulls of Brahma and Vishnu are there in that Malika. So when we are talking about the Trimurtis and you are picking Rudra, the other two will obviously be transitory. So the skulls of Brahma and Rudra and Vishnu are found in that Mala, obviously just to say that Rudra is more permanent than everyone else. It is enough if we say that each Brahma has been added to the Mala of Rudra, therefore Shiva, Paramatma is permanent. That is all that we need to draw from this. And here This is also a particular murti amongst the 25. This is the 16th murti called the Kankala murti. Kankala literally means a skeleton. He who has adorned himself with the skull of Brahma. Kankalam Shodasham Bhavet. So this is the 16th form of Maheshwara in the Maheshwara Vyuha. The next name that we have here is Kamarihi. He who is the enemy of Kama, Manmatha. So this is there in all the Puranas, more or less, the fact that for Kumara, for Subramanya to be born, the Devatas wished to unite Shiva with Parvati, and to do that they sent Manmatha to afflict Shiva. Manmatha was unable to do so, and Shiva was in fact angered that anyone had dared to disturb his tapas. So he opened his third eye and Manmatha was burnt to ashes. So since then, Shiva was termed as Kamari, Madanari, Smarari. There is an even better meaning here that Nilakantha Dikshita has written. It is not just that Shiva is the enemy of Manmatha, but it is also that desire is an enemy to anyone who wishes to reach Shiva. It's a very nice meaning. Kamarihi means Kamaha Arihi Yat Prapto. To attain whom desire becomes an obstacle. He is Kamarihi. So they have quoted the Shiva Purana here. Phaloddeshena deveshi laghurmayi samashrayaha phalarthi tadabhave mam parityaktum kshamo yataha. So Shiva tells Devi that phalarthi phaloddeshena samashrayaha laghuhu. The seeking refuge in me for the sake of some goal is laghuhu. It is a very small matter. It does not qualify as great bhakti, but it is very trivial bhakti. Why? What makes this trivial? The second that goal is attained, or the second that fruit is attained, he has no more use for me. So that bhakti which desires some fruit from Paramatma does not become useful in allowing you to reach Paramatma. It, of course, because you are seeking it from Paramatma, if you have done everything properly, you will receive that from Paramatma. You will receive the desired object from Paramatma, but the second that you obtain that, your relationship with Paramatma is finished. There is nothing more that connects you to him. So, desire, even if it is desire that makes you worship Paramatma, in fact ends up becoming a hindrance to attaining Paramatma. Which is why here they have defined Kamari as he for the attainment of whom is obstructed by Kama. And for that reason, we all are familiar with the Nava-vidha Bhaktis and Srimad Bhagavata. Smaranam Kirtanam Vishnoha, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishno, Smaranam Padasevanam, Archanam Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. This you would have heard in many Upanyasas, so I won't go into detail here. But everyone knows these with regards to Mahavishnu. And there are also shlokas that tell us the same. Shri Vishnu Smarane Parikshita Bhavat. So there are shlokas that tell us which bhakta has used which form of bhakti. Many people wonder, does this apply to Shiva too? Yes, obviously the 9 forms of bhakti will apply to Shiva too. But is there a mode wherein the forms of bhakti have been explained with regards to Shiva? That is also found in the Shiva Purana, and Nilakantha Dikshita quotes it here. Because the reason why he quotes that here is, these forms of bhakti, when inculcated, will allow us to get our desires from Paramatma without the desire becoming a hindrance. So, while we do say that desire will hinder us from truly reaching Paramatma, we also cannot expect to go from where we are till moksha without wanting anything ever again. So, you do want to get everything from Paramatma, you just do not want that to come at the expense of truly understanding Paramatma. So for that, these various forms of bhakti have been told such that you can pursue this bhakti. On the side, you can also desire things from Paramatma every now and then. You should not have a relationship with Paramatma only to desire things. Bhakti should be the primary focus, with which you can also desire things. Which is why, after telling this, yogi va pyathava yogi viraktah kamukopi va. So these forms of bhakti are intended for those who have desire or do not have desire. So what are these forms of bhakti? Madbhakta jana vatsalyam, pujayaschaanumodanam, swayam abhyarchanam bhaktya, madarthe changacheshtanam, Matkatha saktihi swara netranga vikriya mamanusmaranam nityam yaschamam chopajivati. These are the 8 forms. So yaschamam chopajivati yogi vapyathava yogi. Kam virakta kam kopiva. Someone who follows these, he can be a virakta or he can be a kami. He can have a desire. It does not matter. In the end, he will come to me. So what are these 8 forms of bhakti? The first one is Mad Bhakta Jana Vatsalyam. We hear this, right? Bhagavan Bhakta Bhaktiman. Having bhakti towards the bhaktas of Bhagavan. So first of all, serving other Bhagavatas is the first form. Second is Pujayascha Anumodanam. Allowing for the worship of Bhagavan to take place, whether it be in the home or in temples or in society. Then Swayam Abhyarchanam Bhaktya. Doing puja yourself, which roughly corresponds to the Archanam in the Navaveda Bhaktis. Then Angacheshtanam, physical upacharas. This will correspond to Padasevanam or Dasyam kind of thing. Then Matkatha Shravane Saktihi, listening to the Leelas of Bhagavan, which directly corresponds to the Shravanam of the Navaveda Bhaktis. Then Swara Netra Anga Vikriya, either through speech, sight or action, praising Bhagavan. So basically song, dance, poetry, through these kinds of things, serving Bhagavan. Mamanusmaranam nityam, repeatedly thinking of me. Then Yaschamam chopajivati, one who submits his entire life to me, which is the final form or the highest of the Navaveda Bhaktis, which is Atmanivedanam, wherein you submit your independence to Bhagavan. So that is shown as Yaschamam upajivati. He lives off of me. His life becomes dependent on me. So these are the 8 forms of bhakti that Shiva has told Devi in the Shiva Purana. So just as in the Bhagavata Purana, when talking about Vishnu Bhakti, the 9 forms of bhakti have been enumerated. In the same way, in the Shiva Purana, there are 8 forms of bhakti that have been told. And these 8 forms of bhakti will allow us to transcend kama and in the end get Bhagavan. So for that reason, bhakti is to be inculcated. Kama, desire, should not be the primary motive in our relationship with Bhagavan. That is denoted by the name Kamarihi. And Tat Sarvam Kramena Vairagya Sampadana Dvara Moksha Phalakatva Bhiprayam. So all of this bhakti, what is the point of bhakti? It is to get Vairagya. Any amount of bhakti that we get is meant for only one thing: to decrease our interest towards the world and increase our interest toward Atma, Paramatma, Brahman. You can term it whatever you want. So all of these forms of bhakti are meant for that. And Vairagya is the direct opposite of Kama. So Kama is desire, Vairagya is the lack of desire. So bhakti is supposed to take us towards Vairagya, not towards Kama. For that, Bhagavan has enumerated the 8 types of bhakti that we must undertake while serving him. And the form of Shiva that has burnt Manmatha is the 7th Murti in the 25 Vyuhas of Maheshwara. Kamarim Saptamam Vidyat. So out of the 25, the 7th Murti is the Manmatha Dahana Murti. Then the next one is one big story. Andhakasura Andhakasurasudanaya Namaha. This Andhakasura is one of the most prominent Rakshasas that Shiva has killed. As I said yesterday, Jalandhara is one of the most fearsome Rakshasas that has been killed by Shiva. Probably number 2, second place will come to Andhakasura. So Andhakasura, first of all, this Andhakasura we see in Sringeri also. In around December, you will get this Andhakasura Vadha, where Malahanikareshwara will come to Devi's temple, to his sister's home basically. He will come to Devi's temple and they will put one muggu, one rangoli kolam of Andhakasura, holding Shiva on the pallaki. They will walk and basically wipe off that Andhakasura with the feet, symbolic of Shiva destroying Andhakasura. The next day morning, Shiva brings Devi there. Malahanikeshwara brings Bhavani Devi there and shows her what he has done the night before. So that is the Andhakasura Vadha that goes on in Sringeri. So this Andhakasura is a very interesting Rakshasa because he is actually not born to a Rakshasa. He is the son of Shiva and Devi. So once when Devi playfully closed Shiva's eyes, obviously Shiva's eyes are not just normal eyes, they are Surya, Chandra and Agni. So closing Shiva's eyes amounted to the entire cosmos being plunged into darkness. From that darkness was born a child. Because he was born from darkness, he was named Andhaka. Literally someone who is blind or blinding. So this child was later given as a fruit of tapas to Hiranyaksha. So, as I said, the accounts of Puranic narratives will get confusing after some time. But basically, after some point of time, Prahlada rules the Rakshasa Samrajya and he decides that he has had enough, he wants to give it up. So, he has to instate someone else. So, he instates his Chikkappa's son, that is to say, Hiranyaksha's son, who is Andhakasura in the kingdom. So, this Andhakasura is ruling the kingdom. He conquers, as usual, he conquers the three worlds, and one day he goes to the Mahakala Vana, which right now is the kshetra that corresponds to this, is near Ujjaini. So he goes there, and there he sees Shiva and Devi sporting. He sees them in privacy sporting, and he decides that this beautiful lady that he has seen should be his. So he tries to abduct Devi, at which point Shiva fights him. And there are some places where he is killed. He is killed by Shiva. That is one story. One more story is there wherein every time that Shiva pierces him with his bow, the number of every drop of Andhaka that falls on the ground becomes one more Andhakasura, similar to Raktabija. So eventually what Shiva does is, he stabs him with the Trishula, lifts him up and plants the Trishula in the ground, such that Andhakasura is not touching the ground, and he basically bleeds out. He becomes shushka, he becomes dried up, such that there is no more blood in the body. Once all the blood, that is to say the rajas, has left his body, the improper feelings that he had towards Devi also subside. He realizes his mistake and pleads for forgiveness, and in fact he is then made into one of the Ganapatis of Shiva. He is made into one of the leaders of the Shiva Ganas. So basically this story is meant to show us that Bhagavan does not just kill, but he does samskarana. That is to say, he will remove our improper qualities and ensure that we progress forward. That is generally what this story is showing. But in other cases, Andhakasura is just killed. So he is, as I said, he is dried up with the Trishula, and then Shiva just cuts his head off. So in some cases, Andhakasura is killed in this way. There are also other stories, interestingly, in the Kurma Purana and the Matsya Purana it comes, wherein to drink the blood of Andhaka, Shiva creates some matraganas. So these are fierce matriarchal deities. He has created these matraganas, and they are all drinking the blood that is coming from Andhaka. However, obviously each Andhakasura that is created from each drop of blood also has blood. So at some point of time, they cannot drink any more blood. So they say instead that we will devour the entire Jagat. So then Shiva tells them to stop, but they do not listen. So then there is one rule in Shastra that you should not kill that which you have created. Even Brahma tells, Vishavrakshopi samvardhya swayam chettum asampratam. Even if it is a poisonous tree, you will not grow it yourself and then cut it down. So Shiva says, I do not want to destroy these matraganas that I have created. So he does dhyana of Narasimha there. Randomly, somehow, for some reason, Narasimha comes there. So he does dhyana of Narasimha. Then Narasimha appears, and Narasimha creates one devata called Shushkarevati. That devata's name is Shushkarevati. And she does not just drink the blood of Andhaka, but she drains the blood of Andhaka. That is why she is called Shushka Revati. She dries him up, and thereby Andhakasura becomes freed of that quality, and later on he is then taken into the Ganas. So this story is also there. So this story is told to show that the form of Shiva that fought Andhaka is Bhairava. Just as in the Vaishnava Sampradaya, just as Rudra is viewed as an expansion of Sankarshana, who is Narasimha, in the Shaiva Sampradaya, Narasimha is used as an expansion of Bhairava, who is the Rudra Murti of Shiva, the Samhara Murti of Shiva. So this story is told to show the identity between Bhairava and Narasimha. There is some shloka also comes, Kshanad ekatvam apanno, Dadushur devatas tada. They saw Bhairava and Narasimha as one after all of this was over. So that story is also there. So that is the killing of Andhaka, Andhakasurasudana. And here the moral is that, here Nilakanta Dikshita has written that, Prapancha durogdharyapi Devi putrabhisandhi makarot iti gunameva puraskritya dayakrita iti gunaika pakshapatitvam suchitam. The fact that Shiva has still sought to refine and uplift someone who has committed such an offense towards him and his wife shows that he is only interested in the good qualities of people. He does not want to fault them for the bad qualities. Which is why Appaya Dikshitendra quotes one nice shloka in the Kuvalayananda, which Mahasanidhanam is also very fond of. He says, Gunadosho budho grunhan indukshveda viveshwaraha shirasa shlaghate purvam param kanthe niyachati. So this shloka is meant to show us how we should behave when judging the merits and flaws of others. It says that a Buddha, a wise man, should behave like Shiva. Gunadosho grunhan. When he is looking at merits and flaws, he should behave like Shiva. What did Shiva do? Indukshveda viveshwaraha. When the Ksherasagara was churned, two things came out that were given to Shiva. One is the poison, one is the moon. What did Shiva do? The poison was kept inside in the throat. The moon was put on the head for everyone to see. So what is the moral of this? Shirasa shlaghate purvam. A wise man will appreciate the merits of others through the movements of his head. So, for example, nodding the head, etc. Shirasa shlaghate purvam. Just as Shiva also kept the moon on his head. Param kanthe niyachati. Any flaws of anyone else will be relegated to his throat. That is to say, they will not cross his throat. Just as Shiva did not let the poison cross his throat and come out, a wise man will not let any words that are disparaging to others cross his throat and come out. Any criticism of others that is not constructive will be kept forever in the throat. It will not be uttered. So there is a saying in Telugu, manchunte mic lo cheppali, chedunte chevilo cheppali. It is a saying that is there. So in that same thing, that same moral is told about here. That gunamatra grahitvam, the fact that Shiva is so merciful. Next, Gangadhara. Gangadharo Lalataksha Kalakala Kripanidhi Bhima Parashuhastascha Mrigapanir Jatadhara. Gangadhara, he who bathes the Ganga upon his Jatajutas. So yesterday we had already talked about the name Kapardhi, wherein more or less we talked about the Gangavatarana Katha. In fact, this very same Nilakanta Dikshita has written a very nice kavya called Gangavataranam, a very beautiful kavya describing the descent of Ganga onto the earth. So here, there is one more discussion. Obviously, this is also a sectarian discussion. Obviously, Vaishnavas like to point out the fact that Ganga is the Padodaka, the Charana Tirtha of Vishnu, and that Shiva puts that upon his head. Obviously, this is also a fact that Shaivas will not like. So, what our Shaivas have done is, they have searched the Puranas, and they have found one or two instances in the Puranas wherein Ganga is separate from Akasha Ganga. So, the Ganga that has come onto the earth is separate from the Ganga that washed Vishnu's feet. So, it is not a completely fabricated story, but basically their point is that there is one more story in the Puranas, wherein Ganga does not come from washing Vishnu's feet, but rather Ganga was a daughter of Himavan. And once in the Brahma Sabha, she behaved inappropriately, for which Brahma cursed her to become a stream of water. So since then, that Ganga, who was the daughter of Himavan, became a stream of water in the heavens. Through Bhagiratha's penance, that stream of water was brought onto the earth. So in this story, there is nothing to do with Vishnu. So Shaivas have found a story in the Puranas. They have not created a story, but they have found a story in the Puranas that makes them happy. We don't have to worry about that. Bhagavatpada has told, Ādā vādi pita mahasya niyama vyāpāra patre jalam paschat pannagashayino bhagavatah padodakam pavanam. Bhagavatpada is very clear. Ganga has been sanctified by all three Trimurtis. It was in the Kamandala of Brahma, in the feet of Vishnu, and on the Jata-jota of Shiva. All three Trimurtis have touched it. Therefore, Ganga is pure because of connection with the Trimurtis. Bhagavatpada has given a very neat explanation there in Ganga-Ashtaka. But here, this story is also there. This particular form of Ganga that was cursed by Brahma to become a stream of water is specifically named Kutila, because she acted in a crooked way, therefore she was cursed. Therefore, this river became named as Kutila. So, it is, especially when you are taking a strong Shaiva stance in the Puranas, this river is said to be the river that was brought down by Bhagiratha. Even if it is the river that came from washing Vishnu's feet, we do not mind. Maybe it could even be the case that water was taken from this river to wash Vishnu's feet. See, at some point you have to put a full stop to the stories that you find in the Puranas. The point is that Ganga was in the heavens, it came to the earth. This happened through Shiva. That is all that we have to look at. So here, the point of this story is that Shiva has done something that nobody else could do. Shiva can bear something that nobody else can bear. That was what is told here. We have taken the Aranya Parva. So the story of Ganga obviously is most prominently found in the Ramayana, but it is also found in the Mahabharata in the Aranya Parva. So there, Ganga tells Bhagiratha, Karishyami Maharaja vachaste natra samshayaha. O Bhagiratha, as you have asked, I shall surely come to the earth and from the earth to Patala, such that I can wash the ashes of your ancestors. However, Vegam tu mama durdharsham patantyaha gaganat kshitau na shaktas trishulokeshu kaschid dharayitum nripa. There is no one in the three worlds who is capable of bearing the force of my descent. So, for that reason, Anyatra vibudhashreshtat nilakanthat maheshwarat. In all the three worlds, there is only one entity who is capable of bearing my weight or my force when I fall. That is Vibudha the greatest amongst the Devatas, who is Maheshwara. So, the point of this story is that when Bhagavan is Gangadhara, it means that he is capable of accomplishing tasks that nobody else can accomplish. That is the moral of the story here. Then Lalataksha, he who has an eye upon his forehead, corresponding to the Agnya Chakra, the Jnana Netra, also the Rudra Granthi. So that is where the third eye is. The Rudra Netra is there. Next, Kalakala. That is the next name. Kalakalaya Namaha. Lalatakshaya Namaha. Kalakalaya Namaha. He is the Kala for even Kala. The word Kala means many things. It means black, it means night, it means dark, it means Yama, it means death. All of time, it also means time. All of these are there. It means all of these for one reason. Kalayati iti Kalaha. That which counts is time. That is to say, anything that is used to measure out something. Anything, regardless of how long or where or in what manner it exists, at the end of the day will be bound by time. There will be some time span that you can confine it to. Even something like space. See, space cannot be confined by space, but space can be confined by time in some manners. It is these avachchedas are there. That is to say, what are the defining factors of any object, which are desha, kala, vastu, time, space and object. So if you look at the way that these three interact with each other, it is quite interesting, because they are all lateral segments of the universe. So one space changes over time, one time moves through one point of space. That is to say, in one space, that one point of space exists in different times. One point of time exists in different spaces. In this way, if you look at the way that these three dimensions interact with each other, it is quite a nice thought experiment. But at the end of the day, the most basic unit that can measure anything is time, which is why Kala is referred to as such. So he who is not defined by even that is Kala. And of course, if we take Kala to mean Yama, this will of course refer to the story wherein Shiva kills Yama to protect Markandeya. So that aside though, the nicer meaning is that even time and death do not have a hold over him. That is to say, time is used to measure everything else, because time is more permanent than anything else. He is more permanent than even time. There is one shloka that Nilakanta Dikshita himself has written in, I think, Kali Vidambana only. Api kalasya yah kalaha sopi kalam pratikshate. Even though Shiva is Kalakala, still we will say that Kala alone is superior, because api kalasya yah kalaha, even he who is the Kala to Kala, he also waits for the right Kala to do anything. He does not do anything of his own free will. Bhagavan will only do something once the karmas fructify to the right amount and once it is the right time to do something. So although Bhagavan is beyond time, even he ends up waiting for the right time to do anything. Therefore, although Bhagavan is Kalakala, it is still our position that Kala is what runs this world, is what Nilakanta Dikshita says. Again, though, he will say in the end of Kali Vidambana that Kalakalam prapannanam kalah kinnah karishyati. Kali can be very horrible. It can have all kinds of ill effects. But Kali is after all a span of time. So for us who have sought refuge in Kalakala, what will Kala do to us? Kalakalam prapannanam kalah kinnah karishyati, he says. That is also a very nice statement. So this nature of Paramatma is brought out as Kalakala. And this is the 8th Murti in the Maheshwara Vyuha, Kalakala Mathashtamam. Then the next name is Kripanidhi, he who is the repository of Daya. Here he quotes one Veda mantra, Arhanyadam Dayase Vishwamabhuvam Nava Ojiyo Rudratvadasti. This is one Veda mantra that is there. Arhan idam Dayase Vishwam. O Rudra, you show mercy upon this entire cosmos, Abhuvam, that has been born of water. Nava Ojiyaha Rudratvadasti. There is no one Rudra who is as valorous as you. So the reason I am telling this is, it is not only Vishnu and Indra that have statements in the Vedas that talk about their supremacy. Pratad Vishnastavate Viryaya, Tad Vishnav Paramam Padam, Agniravamo Devanam Vishnav Prathamaha. These statements that talk about Vishnu's supremacy are there. There are also statements that talk about Indra's supremacy. There are also statements like this that talk about Rudra's supremacy. Nava Ojiyaha Rudratvadaste Tvattaha Ojiyaha Ojaswan Itaraha Nasti. There is no one who has more valor or capabilities than you. Even so, you are still Kripanidhi. Right? As is a Kshama Shaktau, mercy and valor. When these two go together, that is where valor truly shines. Well, Bhagavad Pada says, Vittam Tyaga Sametam Kshamanvitam Shauryam. In Chaturbhadram, there are 4, in the Prashnottaratnamalika, he says there are 4 qualities that are exceedingly rare in people. So, Tyagam Priyavak Sahitam, Jnanam Agarvam, Kshamanvitam Shauryam. In these, there are 4 qualities that it is. Basically, charity that is accompanied by pleasantness of mind or in pleasantness of speech, jnana that is not afflicted by arrogance, and in this way, Kshamanvitam Shauryam. Valor that is adorned by mercy. So, Bhagavan is Kripanidhi even more so because despite having more valor than anyone else, he still has that aspect of mercy within him that we have seen in many stories until now and that we will see in many stories coming forward also. Actually, connecting this also to the Kamari, one very interesting line is there in the Kumarasamha. Maybe if we talk about Kumarasamha once more, we will mention that again. But basically, Shiva has burnt Manmatha, although Manmatha was actually only trying to do him a favor. So later on, the Asharira Varni tells Rati, Manmatha's wife, that once Shiva gets married, Manmatha will come back to life and she will once again have the pleasure of her husband's company. So once Shiva is married, he and Parvati are still sitting there in the Vivaha Mandapa and the reception, basically, all the Devatas are coming and giving their gifts and going. So at that point, the Devatas all come and they pray that Manmatha be restored. At that point, Kalidasa writes that Shiva not only restored Manmatha, but also allowed Manmatha to work on him from then on, because he is now married. So Shiva not only restored Manmatha, but he gave permission for Manmatha to use his arrows on him. And there, the moral, the Arthantaranyasa that Kalidasa has done is that, therefore, if you want something, you should always ask your superior at the right time. If you ask Shiva while he is doing tapas, you will become burnt. If you ask him right after marriage while his wife is sitting next to him, he will happily say, okay. This is what Kalidasa says there. So that is also one kind of mercy wherein even Manmatha, who had actually seemed at counter purposes with Shiva, was once again graced and given back his body. So Kripanidhi. Then Bhima. This is also one of Bhimaya Namaha. This is also one of the 8 Murtis of Shiva. And here also Bibhetyasmaditi Bhimaha. Bhimadibhya Bhimadayaha Apadane. One Vyakarana Sutra is there. So, seeing whom fear is obtained is Bhima. So someone who instills fear in those around him is Bhima. So this is referring to Shiva as that Paramatma who sets various jivas into their duties. We know the usual mantra, Bhishasmad Vatah Pavate, Bhishodeti Suryaha, Bhishasmad Agnischendrascha, Mrityurdhavate Panchama iti. We know this mantra from the Taittiriya, that it is out of fear of that Paramatma that Surya rises, it is out of fear of that Paramatma that the wind blows, it is out of fear of that Paramatma that Agni burns and Indra reigns and that death takes away life at the right time. There is one more mantra in the Kathopanishad. Yedidam kincha jagat sarvam prana ejati nisritam mahadbhayam vajra udyatam ya etad vidur amritaste bhavanti. That Paramatma, due to whose fear Vayu moves. Vayu performs all his activities out of the fear of which Paramatma? Those who know that Paramatma attain immortality. And there they have written that Mahad Bhayam Vajramudyatam. He is terrifying like an upraised thunderbolt. So there Bhagavad-pada writes that if I do not do my job, my Yajamana, that is to say my master, will throw a thunderbolt upon my head. This is the kind of fear with which all the devatas do their jobs. Again, this is not a cruel fear. It is the realization that there is someone above you who has infinitely more capabilities than you. So the kind of fear that you will have when set to task by such a person is the kind of fear that is being talked about here in the Devatas. And this is the form of Shiva that presides over Akasha in the Panchabhutas. The Akasha Murti of Shiva is known as Bhima. Because, now why it is the connection between Akasha and Bhima? For someone to control all of these different devatas across the universe, that Paramatma has to be Sarvavyapaka. The aspect of the Panchabhuta that most aptly embodies the nature of Paramatma being omnipresent is Akasha. So, Bhima corresponds to Akasha, is what Nilakanta Dikshita has written here. Sarvantaryami eva bhayahetuhu. Only if the master is someone whom you cannot escape, will you always remain bound to him. Which is why we say the second that an employer takes a sick day, we don't know what, in schools also, right? If the teacher is not there and there is a substitute teacher, the children's behavior that day will be questionable. Only if the teacher is there at all points of time, the children will be well behaved. In the same way, only if the master is there at all points of time, in all places, will the subordinates be well behaved. This is only possible if Paramatma is the Antaryami of everyone, ensuring that they are doing their jobs. This is best seen in the Akasha, which is omnipresent. So, that is the form of Shiva as Ugra. This is also found in the Veda. Namo Ugraya cha Bhimaya cha Namo Agre Vadhaya cha. There the Ugra comes. That name Ugra comes. Mriganna Bhimupahatnam Ugram Mridajaritre Ruddhastavanaha. There also Ugra comes. So, the name Ugra is also found in the Veda, in Bhima. Bhima. The word name Bhima is also found in the Vedas. In fact, in the Mahabharata, Bhima is named after Shiva. When we say his name was Bhimaha, he was not named randomly. He was named after Shiva in the Mahabharata also. So, our children can also be named Bhima. That is the point. The name Bhima belongs to Shiva. That is the name of Shiva. Next, Parashuhasta. Parashuhasta Yanamaha is the name. So, this Parashu is an axe. This also we find in many murtis of Shiva, especially as we said in the Dhyana Murti of this Aṣṭa-vidha Shatanama, Harina Parashu Paranim. Usually whenever the deer is there, the axe will also be there. So this axe is Traigunyam Shulametasya Parashuhu Satyanishtata. So just as we said that the Trishula refers to the three gunas, the Parashu refers to Satyanishtata because it is cutting, the truth is cutting. It separates what is real from what is not real. Just as an axe, if it comes down, it will separate one thing into two cleanly. So too Satya, truth, separates what is real from what is not real. So the axe is representative of Shiva's Satyanishtata. So this is also in two forms. His allegiance to truth is also in two forms. One is that he is Satya Sankalpa. Whatever Shiva wills will indeed happen. So this is one thing. One more meaning is that he is attainable by those who practice the Satya Vrata. those who he is so fond of the truth that he is ready to grace those who follow the Satya Vrata. Therefore, Paramatma's Parashu is a testament to his Satyanishtata. Parashu's Satyanishtata is what the Agama is telling us. And that is the name Parashuhasta. Then the next name, right after, as you said, Parashu and Mriga always come together, usually in the iconography of Shiva. Next name is Mrigapanihi, Mrigapanaye Namaha. This is a very big concept. Shiva as the Mrigadhari is a topic that comes in almost every single Purana. There are very few stories that come in all Puranas. This Mriga story, the Daksha Yajna story, is one of those. It is found in at least, I think, a good 15, 16 out of the 18 Puranas. So, this Mriga, the fact that Shiva has a deer in his hand, this deer in the hand has many stories associated with it. One story is the rishis of the Darukavana. These rishis of the Darukavana are notorious in Puranic literature. So, there is one Vana that is named Darukavana. These rishis were all great karmishthas. They were all or karmathas. They were karmat. The word karmishtha does not exist in Sanskrita. We have started using it in local languages, but the word karmishtha does not exist. Brahmishtha, dharmishtha will be there. It is karmatha. That is the right usage of the word. So they were all karmathas in that they only believed in the supremacy of karma. They were completely shut off to the jnana marga. However, they had done enough punya that it was time for Shiva to come and open their eyes. So what he did was he came as a mendicant, that to a Digambara mendicant, that is to say without even wearing anything, and he did certain actions that caused them to become astounded by the capabilities of this youth in front of them. And that too they became very angry with him and they tried many ways to kill Shiva who had come. So as part of that they did many abhichara homas, that is to say occult sacrifices. So you will see the results of 2 or 3 of those later on, but one of those was, the results of one of those was that they created an animal, whether it was a deer or not is not clear in the text because they have only written Mrigaha, which could mean a deer. But why you would set a deer to attack someone to kill them, I don't know. I do not recall if deer have ever been used in war. We have seen elephants and tigers and lions. I have not seen anyone using a deer as an animal of war. So I am hesitant to see whether or not the deer that they created from that occult sacrifice was in fact a deer, or whether Mriga only means a wild animal there. But that animal that they created, it was unable to harm Shiva, and indeed he grabbed it and held it in his hand. That is one story. Okay, this is a normal story. One nicer concept is that this Mriga, this deer represents the Vedas. So there is one dhyana shloka of Shiva, that too for the Mrityunjaya Murti. So the Mrityunjaya Murti you would have seen, Shiva has 4 hands and 2 of those hands will be pouring Amrita from kalashas onto his head. That is how the Mrityunjaya Dhyana Murti is. So in that Dhyana Murti it is written that Swakarra Kalita Mudra Pasha Vedaksha Malam. So in his 4 hands Shiva has Mudra, Pasha, Veda and Akshamala. Mudra is the Chin Mudra, Pasha is Anus, Veda, keep this aside, Akshamala, Japamala. Then in another dhyana, in another tantra, for the same Mrityunjaya Dhyana Shloka, the same form is described and there it is written that Mudra Pasha Mrigaksha Sutra Vilasat Parnim. So there while describing what all are in Shiva's hands, it says Mudra Pasha Mriga Aksha Sutra. So the list is exactly the same except where earlier there was Veda, here there is Mriga. So therefore it follows that this Mriga, this deer is a representative of the Vedas. So this is as per Mantra Shastra. Then there is one more meaning that Mrigaha means that which searches. Because animals always go in search of food and water, they are called Mrigas. Mrigayati iti Mrigaha. So the fact that Mrigapanihi, he whose hand is set in the mode of begging, seeking food. That is to say, he who is a bhikshu. His hands are always begging. This is one more story. The most common story, however, is that when Shiva went to the Daksha Yajna, so in most stories we see that Shiva did not go himself, but he sent Veerabhadra. In the Mahabharata though, we mainly see the story that Shiva himself goes to the Daksha Yajna with bow in hand to forcibly take the Yajna Bhaga that belongs to him. So in that juncture, the yajna itself becomes terrified of Shiva, takes the form of a deer and starts running away. That deer is hunted by Shiva, grabbed and held in his hand. That is to say, all yajnas belong to Shiva. There is no yajna that can escape him. There is no yajna that is outside his grasp. All karma finds its rest in him. We will see this also talked about later on. And then there is one more interesting story in the Puranas, wherein once Prajapati created Kama and gave him his bow and arrows. And then he went on creating other things. Immediately once he gave Kama his bow and arrows, Kama asked Prajapati, have you tested these? Are they rated for quality use? Brahma said, yeah, they should be fine. I did not test them, but we have quality assurance. I think it is good. You go ahead. Manmatha says, okay, my trial run will be on you. He shoots Brahma with an arrow. Immediately just then Brahma had created one devata called Sandhya. The Sandhya devata had just been created as his daughter. So this is not like the story of Brahma and Saraswati. This is different. Here Sandhya is actually Brahma's daughter, and immediately Brahma is possessed by infatuation for her and starts running after her. She, obviously, it is her father that is acting like this. She becomes very uncomfortable and she takes the form of an animal that can run very quickly. That is to say, a deer. Seeing that she has taken the form of a deer, Prajapati also takes the form of a deer to follow her. The moral of the story is Kama can make anyone into an animal, is the point. That is the moral of the story. So Brahma follows her as a deer. Seeing this, Shiva, as he just said, he is Bhima. If anyone under his creation, especially a jiva that he has placed in a position for a particular duty, if they set a foot out of line, it is his job to correct them. So Shiva immediately comes as the Adikirata, the primordial hunter, with a bow in hand, and Brahma becomes terrified that he freezes. That Brahma in the form of a deer is grabbed by Shiva. So that is also one more origin for the deer in Shiva's hand. So now in this story, it represents the fact that all devatas are in the hand of Shiva, and especially all illicit tendencies that our mind may have, kama, etc., that are fickle like a deer. These are all arrested by Shiva. This is talked about in the Shiva Mahimna Stotra. You would have heard this shloka. Prajanatham natha prasavam adikam swam duhitaram gatam rohit bhutam riramayishu mrishyasya vapusha dhanushpaneryatam divamapi sapatrakritamam trasantam tedyapi tyajati namragavyadharabhasaha. So Prajanatham, that Prajapati, swam duhitaram riramayishum, who wanted to improperly associate with his daughter, who had Rohit Bhutam, his daughter who had become a deer. Remember the word Rohit. Rohit means a deer in Sanskrit. Gatam Rohit Bhutam, Riramayishohu Rishyasya Vapusha. Rishya also means a deer. That is why Rishya Shringa is the name. Rishya is a deer. He who has the horn of a deer is Rishya Shringa. So Rishyasya Vapusha, the Prajapati had taken upon the form of a deer to follow his daughter Sandhya, who had taken the form of yet another deer. So then Dhanushpanehe yatam, Shiva came with bow in hand, and to this day Brahma is still terrified of you. Adyapi mragavyadharabhasaha nityajati. To this day Brahma is unable to let go of his fear of you. Why is this? This is actually an astronomical phenomenon. So Rohit Bhutam, the Sandhya Devata that became a Rohit, is the Rohini Nakshatra. That is followed by Mrigashiras. Mrigashiras, again, the head of a deer. That is Brahma. And following the Mrigashiras Nakshatra comes Ardra, which is Rudra's Nakshatra. Ardraya Rudraf Prathamana Eti. Ardra is Rudra's Nakshatra. So, Prajapati following Sandhya is Mrigashiras following Rohini. And this Mrigashiras being followed by Ardra is Brahma as a deer being hunted by Rudra. And it's said that Adyapi Natyajati, because this Mrigashiras and Ardra are always in proximity of each other. They are always very close to each other. So, seeing that your arrow, so this Ardra is intermittently sometimes taken to be Rudra himself or Rudra's arrow. So, seeing that Rudra's arrow is so close to him, Brahma as the Mrigashiras Nakshatra is still terrified to this day. Is one more thing that is there in that story. That is the story of Mrigapani. Then Mrigapanir Jatadhara. Mrigapanir Jatadhara. So these jatas of Shiva, he has matted locks. Jatadharaya Namaha. This is the ascetic form of Shiva. So one thing about Shiva's form is, as we mentioned yesterday, Vishnu's form is auspicious. Shiva's form causes auspiciousness, though it is itself not having auspicious attributes. There is a difference between something causing auspiciousness and being auspicious, and having an auspicious attribute. So the thing is, Shiva's form or Vishnu's form, both are auspicious. But Shiva's form consists of inauspicious components, we can say. The components are inauspicious, but the sum total is very auspicious. So, that aside though, the form of Shiva is that which is meant to inculcate Vairagya. The point of seeing Shiva should be that you should see Shiva and immediately realize that he wants nothing to do with the pleasures of this world. So all those markings are there on Shiva's body such that some things we too can replicate. So one such mark of that are the jatas. So as we know, rishis of old, rather than putting, what is that, hair dye, black annar, this oil, parachute oil, rather than all of that, no need to take care of the hair. You wrap it up and leave it as matted locks that you don't have to take care of. That is why this hair is always talked about as tamra jata. It is coppery in color. Even in Rudra we get Harikeshaya. He whose matted locks are that coppery brown, green, reddish in color. Because they do not have any samskara, that Kesha samskara, Taila samskara is not there. It has not been properly oiled or taken care of, which is why the matted locks are in that color. The same description is given for rishis also. For many times in Vyasa Maharshi's Mahabharata also, when Vyasa Maharshi comes, he is referred as Pinga Jataha or Pingala Jataha. That description is very common, that the jatas are described in that color simply because someone who is not interested in the pleasures of the body will not take the time out of his schedule to meticulously groom and shave everything on his face. So that Vairagya is shown by the jatas. Now that aside, the jatas, as we said, just as the Chandra on Shiva's head is an indication of jnana, so too the jatas of Shiva's head are indicative of all the punya kshetras in the world. In the Purana, Varaha Purana is told, Jatasvarupena samasta sagaraha kulachala sindhuvahascha sarvashaha bibharshi tavasthitam. So as your jatas, you bear all the Kulaparvatas, Kulachala, Samasta Sagaraha, all the oceans, Kulachalaha, the 7 Kulaparvatas, and Sindhuvaha, all the rivers. So these are all basically, this is the summary of all the Punya Kshetras. All our Punya Kshetras are either the Samudra is only a Punya Kshetra on, that is to say, it is only worthy to be bathed in on Amavasya or Purnima. We should not, going to the beach is okay, bathing in the ocean is not. As per our Samskriti, we only take bath in the ocean on Amavasya or Purnima. We do not touch the ocean on other days. So the ocean, the 7 oceans on those days, then the mountains, there are many Punya Kshetras that are found on mountains. So all mountains and rivers, these are all our Punya Kshetras. These Punya Kshetras are taking the form of your Jata Jotas. So here the point is that no Tirtha Yatra is complete without remembrance of Paramatma. These Punya Kshetras derive their Pavitrata, they derive their sanctity from Shiva, and therefore, I think we talked about this yesterday also, but no Punya Kshetra or Tirtha is truly sanctified without the remembrance of Paramatma there. Here we are talking about Shiva. The same applies for Narayana or Devi or Ganesha. You can apply the same thing there also. So there Shiva has told in the Mahabharata, Bahireva Shuchirbhutva Tat Tirtham Manmana Vishet. So it is actually telling us about how to take bath in Tirthas. We should not, the first bath of the day should not be in a Tirtha. That is to say, if you are doing a Punya Snana, if you are doing a bath for Punya, if you are taking a bath only to cleanse your body, that is a separate thing. But if you are taking a bath for Punya, the way we go to Kashi for Ganga Snana, for Punya, if you are doing that, that cannot be your first bath of the day. You have to be clean and then go to the river for your bath, because their bathing is not a cleansing act, it is a ritual. So for that you have to have the necessary Shuchitva. So for that reason, bahireva shuchirbhutva, that is to say outside of the tirtha itself you should have cleansed yourself, and then manmanaha tirtham vishet, keeping me in mind you should dip in the tirtha, keeping Paramatma in the heart you should take bath in the tirtha. That is the moral that has been taught here. So in this way the Jatadhara is a testimony to Shiva's ascetic diligence, as well as the fact that all Punya Kshetras find their residence in him and they derive the sanctity from him. So here we have finished 34 names. We will take a break here and resume with Kailasavasi Kavache Kathoras Tripurantakaha Vrishanko Vrishabharudho Bhasmodhulita Vigraha.